Is it possible to become a surrogate without an agency? Well, the short answer is yes, but we need to dig into it a little more. So if you're asking, how can I be a surrogate without an agency? This is the video for you. Stick around, let's jump into it. What's up? I'm Corlandos Scott, and I'm a surrogacy attorney based in Los Angeles. My entire practice revolves around helping people grow their family through assisted reproductive technologies like surrogacy. So in this video, we're going to talk about how to be a surrogate without going through the standard of using an agency, or surrogacy agency as they're called. We'll talk about how to do it, we'll look at some pros, and we'll also talk about some cons. Let's jump right in. So a surrogacy journey may either be an independent journey or an agency-initiated journey, you could call it. Now, an independent surrogacy journey doesn't mean it's going to be just you and the intended parents alone. What it does mean is that you're merely doing away with the presence of a team of surrogacy experts from an agency. So everything else you'll have to search for and find on your own. So we need to talk about readiness. We need to see, is a surrogacy journey without an agency right for you? Are you ready to make that jump? The question becomes, is it right for you? Is it really for you? And in order to find that out, you'd have to start with some research, talking to individuals to find out how it was for them, if they've done that before. Talk to some other industry professionals and find out what kinds of things an agency does, so you'll know what kind of things won't be done for you in your journey if you do it without an agency. It's definitely not impossible to be a surrogate without an agency, but you have to know what you're getting into before you get into it. Now, what about finding intended parents to match with? Well, with an agency, all you have to do is kind of wait. You wait and you get matched with a hopeful set of intended parents. But if you're doing it independently, that's going to require that you search or look for intended parents on your own. Now, you can do this in a number of ways. You can talk to other professionals in your network, like maybe your OB, maybe a fertility doctor, maybe a lawyer if you've worked with a lawyer in the past, or someone involved in assisted reproduction, or you can take to the web. You can go online or on social media and see if there are parents in different forums, in different Facebook groups, and different avenues like that who are looking to be matched independently of an agency arrangement. Now, something else you're going to have to handle on your own if you're doing this independent of an agency is you're going to have to work with the medical professionals independently to complete the processes that need to be completed, from pre-screening to delivery. Now, once you find yourself an intended parent or a couple who's looking to become parents through surrogacy, you and those parents or parent will need to go through a pre-surrogacy screening process. That means that you're going to have to arrange a psychological evaluation, and you'll need to arrange a medical pre-screening process to happen. Now, these pre-screening processes make sure that both you and the intended parents are mentally and physically ready to go through the challenges of an independent surrogacy journey. The last how is you need to find an attorney to represent you. Now, this goes for the intended parents as well. In most states, it is the law that both parties be represented by independent legal counsel. Now, I advise clients to bring on your attorney at the very beginning, and I would say that's doubly important if you're doing an independent journey. You need to have another set of professional eyes and ears to be able to communicate with in order to bounce ideas off of and let them know where you are, what's going on, and at least get some idea of what's to come, or if you need to redo something or look out for something that you may have done wrong up to that point. So bring your attorneys on early in the process, especially if you're doing this independently. Now let's talk about the pros and cons. And of course, we'll start with the pros. One of the pros of doing an independent journey is you have direct access and communication with the intended parents that will allow you to have a more intimate and closer relationship with the intended parents than may be normal with an agency arrangement. Now, this is not to say that when working with an agency, you wouldn't be able to have direct communication. But when you're working independently of an agency, that's the only communication is between you and the intended parents. And you guys together will be handling all parts of the process outside of that needed to be handled by professionals like doctors and lawyers. So you'll be in constant communication for everything from doctor's appointments being scheduled to payments being sent out and everything in between. The other pro is you'd be saving the intended parents probably a lot of money. If the process is done and completed properly and effectively, this could be a boon for the intended parents with regards to the costs or offsetting the costs that are typical to surrogacy. And they may decide that if they're not working with an agency, that would mean they'd want to compensate you more or not. But just know that if you're working independently of an agency, that definitely cuts the cost of the process. It doesn't cut what needs to be done, but it definitely cuts the cost that paying someone else to do those things would incur. Another pro, I guess you could say, it's not necessarily a huge pro, but is that you'll only be dealing with your surrogacy attorney and the medical professionals. There's not another entity or organization that you need to interface with. Now, I say it's not really a pro because it's good to have another set of eyes and ears again to bounce things off of and to make sure you're handling everything properly. But I understand that sometimes it can be a bit cumbersome to talk to your agency lead, your case manager, the doctor, the nurse coordinator, your lawyer, the mental health professional. It becomes an entire group of people that you need to keep in the loop. Now, if you are a repeat surrogate and you've done this kind of thing before, then you may not really need all that high touch and high interaction between yourself and the agency. You may be able to cut some of that out because you're familiar with the process. If it's your first time as a surrogate, just know that you need to know what's going on because things that an agency would typically do are going to fall on your shoulders and the parent's shoulders. All right, and the last pro that I'll mention is that you and the intended parents will have more control, you can say, more responsibility throughout the process, which may either be an advantage or a disadvantage depending on the kind of relationship that you guys mutually agree on having. Now, with this level of control and responsibilities, there has to be a level of mutual trust that develops between you and the intended parents because you both will have to navigate it on your own. And by it, I mean the entire surrogacy journey. Now, that means that communication has to be at a high. That means that understanding has to be at a high. Now, I'm not saying to over-communicate, but make sure that each of you is on the same page regarding all parts of the process. Now, before I talk about the cons of doing an independent journey, you may want to know, well, Corlandos, what can I expect? What kind of things should I look out for in a surrogacy arrangement? Well, you're in luck. I have something for you. It's called the 3 T's of Successful Surrogacy, and you can go get it by clicking the link in the description box below. In that, I walk through the 3 most important things to have in any surrogacy journey, and this is whether you are working with an agency or doing it independently. So I'll tell you what, the first T is team. I'll let you click the link and get the other 2 T's, but team is certainly important. And if you're losing one team member by not working with an agency, you want to make sure you have strong team members for all of the other positions. Let's talk about the cons. Well, for one, you won't have the ease and advantage of having access to case management, meaning a case manager to shepherd you through each of the little steps from scheduling appointments to showing up for the transfer to all that kind of stuff. You won't have that support through a surrogacy agency, and that can be really a 24/7 advantage when you are working with an agency. Number 2, you have to deal with the challenge and difficulty of keeping track of expenses and reimbursements. Throughout the surrogacy journey, many times you're going to be entitled to compensation, reimbursements, and you'll be able to have expenses paid for you. But someone has to keep track of what the contract says, when those things need to be paid out, make a request for those things to be paid, and monitor and keep up with whether or not they've been paid. That's all going to fall on your shoulders because there's no agency to handle those things. Now, this point, or this con, I would say, really ties into the case management portion of it, but you'll have to personally keep track of all the things that your doctor or your attorney won't necessarily be keeping track of for you. Outside of the legal and medical aspects of the journey, you'll need to make sure that you're keeping up with your calendar, your clinic appointments, your doctor's appointments, your scheduling of different events, making sure that all the information from your doctor's appointments are being transferred back to the intended parents. All of these things that a case manager would typically do are going to fall on your guys' shoulders. Another con is you won't have the professional protection, I'll call it, for your rights and interests, which an agency typically provides and protects. Just like we talked about before, the benefits of compensation and being properly and timely paid. Now, you may have a lawyer, your lawyer may have drafted a contract, and that contract may say you're entitled to something, but who's actually reading the contract throughout the pregnancy and enforcing the terms of that contract? That's typically where the agency would come in. They would see that a payment was due to you. They'd make the request for that payment to be paid to you, and they would mark that the payment had been made. Again, that's the agency advocating for your rights per the contract. And now that you're not working with an agency, you'll need to make sure that you're handling that. You don't want to leave anything on the table for sure. Also, you and the intended parents will be responsible for obtaining services and coordinating all the arrangements with the services. Here's one example. One of the things that is, I think, a foundational consideration that every surrogacy journey should have is a life insurance policy, a short-term life insurance policy for the surrogate. Now, although we never like to think about the worst case scenario, we have to protect against the worst case scenario. So for instance, who's going to coordinate obtaining this life insurance policy for you if there's no agency? Make sure that you know what is typical and who's going to handle the things that are typical to the process, like obtaining a health and life insurance policy for the surrogate. And it's funny how a coin has two sides. In the pros section, I mentioned to you that you have direct communication. Well, I'm going to also mention that to you in the cons section as well. You'll have to work directly with the intended parents to communicate about sensitive topics. You know, sometimes the topic of money is just awkward to talk about. And ordinarily, a surrogacy agency case manager or coordinator would handle those things for you. The surrogacy case manager would act as your representative when it came to communicating with the intended parents about things like this. And by doing that for you, the case manager or coordinator can help you make sure that you're getting everything that you're entitled to according to that agency's policies. But now it's going to come on your shoulders, and not that that's a bad thing, but it's definitely something to look out for and know in advance. So tell me, do you think the pros outweigh the cons? Leave me a comment below and let me know which side of the fence you fall on, independent journey or agency connected journey. At the end of the day, it's all going to go back to how ready you truly are before you start the independent surrogacy journey. Now, being a surrogate without an agency, again, it's by all means, it's possible. But the journey will be a little more challenging and possibly confusing, especially if it's your first time as a surrogate.